Okay, I have the hard task of keeping you awake after this huge lunch that you had. So be with me, stay with me. So welcome to this talk about Lean Startup for developers. If you're here, I'm guessing you're not here to see code. If you are, then I'm sorry to disappoint. I won't show you any code. So before we start, I need to know a little bit more about you guys. So in the room, how many of you are not developers? Okay, that's what I thought. That's why I asked the question this way, so that you can keep your arms down and wait. How many of you already thought of creating your own startup one day? Let me see. Yeah, that's maybe half of you. That's what I thought. Okay, how many of you went through and actually did create a startup? Yeah, a lot less. 2 or 3. That's the problem. And how many of you are still working in your own startup? 2, okay, 3. How many of you are working in a startup right now, not necessarily yours? Okay, a little bit more. And how many of you are familiar with Lean Startup already? Okay, so I hope I won't bullshit you two more. How many of you are already fed up of me saying the word startup already? Okay, that's what I thought. Anyway, a few words about me then. Before we start, I've been a Java developer for about 10 years or so. iOS developer for 5 years, so yeah, I am a developer. We're in a developer conference, so everything's good. I've also been advocating Agile methodologies for a little over 8 years. Scrum, Kanban, the whole thing, you know the gist. I've been a freelancer for 5 years, and actually most of these 5 freelancing years I've been in and out of startups that I created, that I joined, and so on. So yeah, I've been a Lean Startup practitioner. I don't really like this term, but it's just to say that, yeah, I've been trying things around. I didn't just discover that yesterday, that's to reassure you. And I've also been a startup coach for the startup acceleration program in near Louvain-la-Neuve called NestUp. Who's already heard of NestUp? Okay, that's what I thought. So I co-created that with a friend of mine, and I've coached a couple of sessions, including this little company 2.5 years ago called Take It Easy. That is now one of the fastest growing startups in Belgium, I think 16 million euros in funding, and that sort of figures just to impress and be proud with my mom. Anyway, and by the way, we are hiring, so if you are looking for a job in a startup, please come to me after the talk. So, before we dive into the real thing with Lean Startup and so on, I think it's interesting to ask ourselves, why would you want to create your own startup? A few good reasons, a few bad reasons, a few reasons you might not even think about. Maybe one of the first one I hear most often, and of course, not the best reasons of all. It's cool to be an entrepreneur, right? You have, it's good with the ladies, you got some swag, you can wander around, say cool words like pivot or MVP. That's nice. Well, the truth is a little less like that. Okay, the sleepless nights, the nightmares, the responsibilities, the pressure from all sides. It's not exactly glamorous that way. Okay, another reason that I hear a lot is, well, I've got this $1 million idea in my mind. I'm sure it's worth something. This picture, by the way, is because usually when you have $1 million idea, you want to protect it with an NDA. The long version of it is a 30-page document with plenty of legal bullshit, and this is kind of a lean version of an NDA. Anyway, it's a friend of mine, special dédicace, anyway. Mention. Well, sorry? Is it on toilet paper? Actually, no, it's a handkerchief or something, yeah. It's a napkin. Yeah, it would be more appropriate, I think, to use toilet paper for this kind of NDA. Okay, well, the truth is, there is no such thing as $1 million idea. and I'll explain why later, but sorry to give it to you guys. Yes, Santa Claus doesn't exist. I'm not shocking anyone in the room, anyway. But yes, and million-dollar ideas don't exist either. And they're kind of hard to find. I mean, yeah, they're impossible to find because they don't exist. Another reason you want to be your own boss, you've read all the biographies of this guy, you're sure you can do a better job, you want to manage people, you want to yell at people, because that's what these guys do, and you want to have power. Well, the truth is power comes with responsibility, as we all know from the wise man. So you have employees that literally depend on you doing a good job. You have investors who breathe their hot air in your neck. And this responsibility is really, really big, let's say. Another reason, yeah, you think your product will be so much better than everything you've seen before. You have all these cool ideas of things to put in there, all the features that you want to build and stuff. Well, don't focus too much on the product because that's not what matters the most. The business model is really important. And we'll show you why after that. Another reason, somebody told you about the problem they have. Okay, that was just to illustrate, because in French, when you hear rumors, you talk about the téléphone arabe, the Arab phone. So anyway, bad joke. Anyway, it's a friend of mine, so I have the right. Anyway. So yeah, you heard about somebody telling you about their problems, and you think you understand it, you think you have some good ideas to solve this problem. Well, the truth is, most of the time it's a better idea to scratch your own itches. Avoid trying to solve somebody else's problem that you don't really understand, that you don't really understand all the landscape around it, everything that has to be taken care of. Well, scratch your own itch is a better approach usually. Okay. Who's tired of being a consultant? Okay. Nobody dares to say, no, I'm perfectly happy, everything's fine. You sell your body, sometimes you feel dirty when you come home, you're forced to do things that you don't like, and you want to get out of this. You want to get out of the rat race and be on your own. Give your own orders, do your own stuff. Truth is, beware of the pimps. They're not the same. But you've got investors, and sometimes their agenda is not the same as yours. They're misaligned. They'll want you to do things their way and not your way, and it's very hard to escape. So, yeah, you still have some responsibilities to someone, and it's not the same kind of responsibilities, but still. Another reason, you're obsessed about building products, and not just any product, the right product, with the right architecture, with a good design, something that can last for years and years with the right material, and you have those tools that you love. Well, the truth is, in a startup, most of the time it starts like that. And that is version 3, with a roof. And you see this little thing where you can do the push-ups and stuff. Amazing. That's already an advanced design. Another good reason, well, you've got the skills. You know how to do it. A tech startup is all about the tech, right? And you've got the tech skills, so you can build pretty much anything. It's just about opening IntelliJ IDEA and create project, and you're good to go. Well, the truth is, yes, tech is important in a tech startup, otherwise it wouldn't be called like that, but that's not the same thing. Usually, you have to think of other skills that are very, very hard to find in just one person, especially the business part of things and the creative part of things. That's why most investors like it when a founding team is made up of those 3 different profiles. So it might be a good idea to surround yourself, find some good friends who are sales guys or designers. Another reason you might want to use your favorite techs. At your current job or for your customer, every time you want to, can I use Spring Boot? No, this is too advanced. Can I use this for him? No, it's open source, forget about it. You've got all this shiny new tech that you would like to use, but you can't. So in a startup, at least you will be able to decide your own architecture and design your own things and use your own products. Well, let me tell you a little story. This building is a new building. When I was an engineering student in France, that was in Rouen, they built a brand new campus for the engineering school where I was, and they had this amazing boat architect design this building. And he did it in a brand new campus where he thought, okay, there was this building besides and this other one on the other side, this would be perfect. And they built that. The problem that the budget for the other buildings didn't come up as soon as they hoped. So the ground was not the same as expected, and this boat started to sink. And actually you could find some buckets of water in the middle of the hallways because water was dripping from the ceiling. That's the kind of things you get when you over-design things. So just to keep in mind. How many of you have at least one side project, pet project? Yeah, that's usually the same who have thought of creating a startup one day. It's funny. Yeah, you have sometimes 1, 2, 3 different projects that you're working on evenings and weekends, and you hope that someday you can turn something into a real business. But the truth is, you will only be able to do one, usually. There are very few examples of successful entrepreneurs who manage to run several startups in parallel. Elon Musk, sorry guys, but you're not all Elon Musk. The guy literally has a TARDIS in his backyard or something to be able to add some hours to the day. I don't know how he does it. But not only does he not manage just 3 startups, but, I mean, building rockets, electric cars, and solar panels anyway. Okay, not everybody can do that. Another reason, yeah, you might want to improve everyone's life. Okay, who doesn't want to end wars, spread love, this is a happy world, and yeah, make the life of everybody a little better? Well, once again, think about niches. Let's not be too radical. A lot of successful startups today, including the most well-known examples like Facebook, Airbnb, started with a niche market. Facebook, we all know it, was Harvard students. Airbnb, it was attendees of conferences in San Francisco. There are a lot of examples like that. And it's always important to think in terms of strategy, going from one niche to the next and learning as you go. I'll explain that later. Another reason, yeah, market research shows you the way. There's some money to be done there. You don't know anything about this market, but you're the first one to read this Gartner report, I'm sure. And nobody has seen it before. Usually those market researches are all about, yeah, there are that many million euros to be made, if it's not billions. There are that many billion customers, and so on. It's all about quantities. But the truth is, when you start and you discover a new market, you want to innovate. We're talking about startups here. You're discovering something new. It's all about quality. And quality really trumps quantity. Let's talk about a few good reasons to do it. You want to invest in yourself. Whatever the outcome, a startup is always a huge opportunity to learn, and to learn fast, like crazy. And so if you want to develop yourself, if you want to discover things about yourself and about not just technical subjects, not just learn some new business skills or whatever, but also learn about yourself, about human beings, about relationships and so on, startups are really concentrated like that. Sorry, forgot this slide. Anyway, invest in yourself. Another thing, you're obsessed about finding your own solution, and I insist on finding, because it's not about having the right idea for the good solutions, it's about looking for one, searching. Okay, you're never satisfied until you have found the right one. You're looking in all directions, you're asking questions, you're trying things, you're experimenting. That's your goal in life. The process is more important to you than the end. Then that's a good way to do it in a startup. You have some unique opportunities, you have some unique expertise, you are especially well introduced in a given field, you have an address book of very relevant people in your field of expertise. That's a good thing also. That's something that investors are looking at, because yeah, it's hard to reproduce, it's hard to copy. If you want to grow as a human being, as I said, It's the fastest way I know to do it. And sometimes you might even be fed up of people complaining around you and you don't want to complain anymore. You want to be a part of the solution. Good thing. For me, the last and probably one of the best reasons is over the years you've met some great people, you've enjoyed working with them, but you know, you switch from one customer to the next, from one job to the next, and you dream of the day when you will be able to work with all of them at the same time. Build your own dream team. That's the kind of thing that you can do in a startup. And once again, it's really valued. It has a huge valuation, more than any good $1 million idea. The team is a key aspect. So, some reasons why you would not do it. What prevents you, what holds you back right now. The infamous golden cage. You have your company car, you have your gas card, you have your health insurance. You know what you have, you don't know what you get. So you might, you know, stick there. You know what you have. And that's a good place to be. Your comfort zone is comfortable after all. So why not stay there? Well, of course, we all know that the fun begins at the end of your comfort zone. That's where you start to learn. That's where you start to evolve. And that's where you start to change things for the better. You might think that you don't have enough money set aside, because that's true. Creating a startup costs money. It will cost you money. It will cost investors money. Sometimes, yes, it even costs your family money. One of the first sources of investment is often what we call the 3 Fs: friends, families, and foes. And it's something that can, take a lot of people around you with you. And if you don't have enough money set aside, then you might be screwed. Well, I'm going to show you that you don't need that much money that you think. And actually, those days, it has never cost less to create a startup. So that's a good thing for us. Another reason not to do it would be that you think you miss some key business skills. Truth is, sometimes those skills are there. They're just buried. And you need to wake them up. You need to discover them. Sometimes they're not there. I mean, it's not something that you can control. And it's something that you can learn. But if you're not interested, the best solution is just to surround yourself with people who already have those skills. Okay? Another reason not to do it. Sometimes developers gotta eat. You need to fill the fridge, you need to pay the rent, you need to pay for your A5 Avant car, you know the one, anyway. You need to pay for all that. You have a lot of financial responsibilities, you have wife and kids, and even if you don't have all that, you still have some level of comfort because, that's the whole point of being an employee or being a consultant, is that you build a certain level of life and you don't want to lose any of it. That might be a good reason, but once again, make your choice. Another reason, you don't have enough time, and it's true. Creating a startup takes time. Now, if you think that you don't have enough time today because you're spending your nights and weekends on it, and at least when you can create your startup and quit your job and you can do it all week, then you won't need to do it on nights and weekends. Think twice. Might have some surprises there as well. I don't know about the age average in the room, but sometimes people that think that, startups are for youngsters. All the things that you hear about those guys dropping out of college, doing it at the age of 20 or something, and they seem to have all the ideas, all the energy, and once again, when you're older, you have all these responsibilities, and you're not that idealistic anymore. So maybe you missed that. Truth is, the youngsters have their own drawbacks. They don't have your experience. They don't have your address book. They certainly don't have any real-world experience per se, and that can be very, very precious. Don't underestimate that in a startup. That's a common one. You think your ideas are not good enough. Once again, don't focus too much on ideas. Ideas are worthless. I repeat it and I say it out loud. just to reassure you, and I'll show you why later, but don't focus too much on ideas. And some people think, yeah, but I'm not in the right place. I'm in Belgium. Come on, what is it like a country to create a startup? Belgium. I would like to be in Silicon Valley or in Tel Aviv or in Berlin. That's where the shit happens, right? Well, no, there are some startups that are created in Belgium, and actually they have a few points ahead. In the Silicon Valley, there is the resonance effect. If you do something that won't work in the rest of the world, but only works in the Silicon Valley, then you might remain blind to it for years. And a lot of startups have failed with that. And yes, it's easier to find some investment capital in the Silicon Valley. Actually, I would say it's even too easy. Okay? The lack of funding makes you creative. Of course, too much lack of funding, the opposite direction, is not good at all either. But yeah, too much funding can be evil in disguise. And certainly one of the reasons I have heard the most, especially in Europe, is this one. What happens if I fail? What can I write on my resume for those 2 years that I was creating a startup and I failed? There's a blank. I don't want to talk about it. I'm ashamed of it. Don't be. Really don't be. That's one of the key differences, actually, with between, for example, Belgium and Silicon Valley. It's not just about the money. It's also about the culture. Over there, when you fail, it's good. You learn. Doesn't mean that you aim at failing, but if you fail, and especially if you fail fast, if you fail small, then you learn, and you iterate, and you improve. And you have a unique thing for you as developers. You can go freelance. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. By the way, nice transition. Why are you uniquely positioned to create your own startup? Okay, this one is a little far-fetched, but stay with me. You have your developers, okay? There are those 3 key skills that are important for starting a business. Development, tech, business, and creation. I would argue that software development is the hardest skill to learn. It doesn't mean that it's the hardest one to master. It doesn't mean that it's the smartest one or anything, but that's the one with the longest learning curve. Okay? If you are a developer and you want to learn business skills, everybody will tell you that it's easier that way than the other way around. Okay? Because of that, developers are rare. And like the panda bear, it's hard for them to reproduce. Okay, this one is really too far-fetched. I won't do it anymore. Anyway, they are rare like the panda bear. That's better. Anyway. So that's a good thing for you. You're developers. Yay. Most of you probably already know about Agile methodologies, about Scrum, about Lean, about Kanban and all that. And this is a key element, not just because of the methodologies themselves, but because of the philosophy behind them. Okay? It's all about eliminating waste. It's all about being efficient. It's all about being lean. So that's a good thing for you as well. Another key thing for you, you are surrounded by problems. Okay? Especially at your customers, the company you work with, you're always surrounded by fires that you have to put off. And that's a good thing because, believe me, you will see fires in startups. And you will have to put them off because they're your responsibility now. So keep your ears and eyes opened. Usually in those fires there is some hope, there is some opportunity, there are some things that you can learn. And as I said, as developers, it's easier than ever to go freelance. So if something goes wrong, if it doesn't work, contrary to these guys, you can go back. Okay? You can earn some money for a few months, do a small mission, okay? You refill the tanks, and you're good to go again. Give another try. I did that for, as I said, probably 3 years. So, with all that, do you have any questions already or remarks? I like to do it in between instead of waiting for the end. So, if you already have some things to say, no? Is everybody awake? Digestion works? Okay. So, let's go and create this startup together. The usual way, okay? Let's say you have this great idea and you want to do it, and yeah, there's this common knowledge of how it's usually done. First step, market study. Of course, if you're doing something that doesn't interest anyone, and there's no market for it, there are no customers ready to pay for it, then you're screwed. And how can you validate that better than with, well, surveys, right? So you hire a marketing firm to understand who your market is, who your customers are, what their expectations are, how they react with current solutions, and so on. And you get some great figures and graphs and diagrams and pie charts. That's great. Those market reports, they're quantitative only. They only give you figures. You have no qualitative data whatsoever. Okay? You don't know if people are what people's emotions are regarding existing solutions, for example. They only tell you what they want to tell you. You don't know if they lie. You don't know if they exaggerate some things. If in a market research, if in a survey you ask questions like, would you be ready to pay 20 euros for that? Of course, no. 10? No. 5? No. 0? Yeah, it's okay. That's not useful data. But more importantly, it takes an awful long time. And it takes too much investment. That's waste. That's what we call waste. If you spend 3 months designing a questionnaire and giving it out and interpreting the results and learning the lessons from it, you won't do it twice. Especially if you pay tens or hundreds of thousands of euros for it. So that's waste. And it's only valid if you want to verify a strong hypothesis. In other words, it's really valid when, I don't know, you want to open a restaurant or a hair salon or anything like that. Existing business model, okay? Doesn't mean that it's worth less than a startup. Well, actually, it just means that it's an existing business model. You're just replicating something that already exists at another place, and you want to know if this other place, if this other neighborhood where you want to settle, if this other community that you want to leverage has some potential. For that, market study is good. But a startup is not that. A startup is usually a new business model. It's not something that you are replicating. It's something that is substantially different, actually different enough to have leverage, okay, to create some big opportunities for not only investors but also yourself. Some big growth opportunities. It can be that you're replicating something that already works in the US, for example, and you want to do it in Europe. But even then, the changes between US culture and Europe culture are so big that it's basically starting something new. And market study really don't work for that kind of thing. Or at least they don't work, they are not worth it. They're not worth the time and money, let's say. And they force you to do very long iteration cycles. We all know from Agile methodologies that if you have to fail, if you have to learn, you have to do it fast. You have to iterate over and over again in order to improve. Okay? And this is the kind of thing that you cannot do with market studies that take months to give their results. And yeah, it tends to confirm what you already want to hear. It's incredibly hard when you design those kind of questionnaires, those kind of surveys, to be completely neutral and try not to sell what you already have in mind. And that's really what's necessary to discover new opportunities and new markets. So, but okay, that's usually the first step, as they say in business school. Second step, now that I have my market study, let's say I have all these figures, and I know how to put them in an Excel sheet and write some nice formulas to give me red and green cells and all that. let's write a business plan, right? Usually it takes a few weeks to a few months to write. Okay. Once again, it means very long iteration cycle. Okay. The worst part is it's very cumbersome to update. You all know, hopefully, that these kind of businesses tend to change a lot. Not just because they're not adapted at first, but because the market itself changes a lot. And it's all about a matter of, a game of cat and mice sort of thing. You have to adapt permanently. Things that you thought were true yesterday might have been true, but are not anymore. And how do you adapt your business plan to that when it's a document that's worth 30, when it's not 100 pages? Okay, that's not a good thing. Even if you put it in a text file to be in GitHub, anyway. And who the hell will read it? That's the hidden truth that nobody will tell you, but even when you have your business plan and you give it to investors, like you're all proud of it because you've spent your nights and weekends writing it and making all those pie charts very shiny and stuff, and they say, thank you, to the bin. They just want to know you've written it, basically. Very few of them actually read them, because they just have too many. And they know that the information that is in there will be irrelevant tomorrow, if not the day after. Okay? So, is it really worth it? And usually in those kinds of documents, you tend to include one of these 3-year projection plan where you use plenty of hypotheses. Okay, I'm going to grow 10% every month. And I'm going to have these kind of revenues, but at the same time, I'm going to need to hire that many employees. So many ifs, so many hypotheses that, is it still true? Is it still relevant? Usually you get that sort of thing. That's what you want to show, okay? The infamous hockey stick curve. At the beginning, it's going to go like that. We're going to go a little down, but don't worry. We'll skyrocket afterwards. Nice. That's the kind of thing that, come on, don't you think that investors have seen that like hundreds of times? And I'm just talking about investors here because they're usually the ones interested in that. But of course, your customers don't care about that shit. They just want to see a good product. And here you're just targeting investors, okay? And what happened most often is actually at the low part of this curve, goes down, not up. And once again, investors know that. But okay, let's say you've got your nice business plan, you've spent a month writing one, you have 100 pages with shiny pie charts and you're very proud of it. So now you're reassured, right? You have your market study, you have your business plan, you have your projections, and everything seems to be looking good for your future. So you trust, and you do that. You incorporate, you create your famous company. You want to be CEO of my own company, Inc., right? That's nice. It's also very nice on a business card, by the way. That's usually the second step. Once you've gone out of the lawyer's office, you go straight to the printer and print yourself a nice stack of business cards with your name in there. I'm CEO, bitch. Think twice. Just to give you one example that I know personally, in Belgium, at least in Brussels, because that's where I did it, you need to set aside 6,000 euros to create a company. And that's just an SPRL, so BVBA, I think, in Flemish, anyway. That's just to create a basic company, okay? And that's the minimum if you have at least one associate. 6,000 euros, it's not some small money anyway. And you can't spend it right away, by the way. It takes about a month to get the paperwork together. Maybe one day we'll be able to create a company in an afternoon like in London, but for now in Belgium, that's what it is. It takes about a month. And everybody that I know who have tried to reduce that delay, there's always something going wrong. Like the lawyer is not there, and it takes more time to iterate over the initial paperwork and so on. But yeah, it takes time and energy. And then, once you have your company, of course, it's not all. It's a whole package. You also need an accountant to take care of your accounts. Otherwise, you're going to have some problems with taxes. And believe me, they won't wait for you to do any profit to get after you. And you also need an office address. When I created my startup, I thought, okay, I don't need an office because I work in a co-working space, I have my own home and so on. I can't put the legal address of my company at home because I'm just renting an apartment and I don't have the right to do that. But that's not a big deal. I'm going to take a letterbox in some business center somewhere. That's going to be enough. A month later, I got a notice from the VAT office or something, and they wanted me to move to a real office. So I went in search of a real office, and that's minimum 200, 250 euros per month. And I actually found a business center, and that's true. They did something like an office, 2 square meters, just a desk and a chair where you could not even sit in it because there was not enough room, and your name on the door, and that's all that the law requires. So it's an office, I pay for it, but I can't even get in it and work in it. And for that, it was, 250 euros or something. It's a business model, indeed. It's a weird one, but it's one. Okay. So yeah, it takes some money also to pay for a regular office and so on. But it's cool when you have your own office and you have your office key and you get, this is my... Anyway. If you want to shut it down in case it doesn't work, okay, in best case scenario, it costs about 3,000 to 4,000 euros to shut down because you have to go back to the lawyer and to the réviseur d'entreprise, I don't even know how to say it in English. I mean, you have all sorts of procedures to verify that you're not cheating with taxes. Come on, I haven't made enough profit yet. But still. So, yeah, you'd better be pretty sure it's going to be worth it. For the record, I finally managed to transfer my company to somebody else a year ago, 2 years after there was no activity anymore, because it takes a lot of time, and I didn't want to pay for those 4,000 euros. Well, it probably cost me more. Anyway, let's say you have your company, you trust it, you know that it's going to be good, you have your office key and you're all proud of it, you have your accountant who pats you on the back and say, yeah, it's going to be 2,000 euros a quarter, but don't worry, it's going to work. Next step, the infamous prototype. Because you need something to show. You know that your very carefully written business plan is not going to cut it. You're actually going to need something to show. And yeah, Photoshop screenshots, you would not be proud of yourself, right? You're a developer, so you need to build something. So, first thing, guessing. Okay? You already know what people need. Don't need to ask. And if you ask, then you might, trigger some questions like, what is it that your product is about? Maybe I can do the same. So you want to keep it to yourself, and yeah, you can guess what people are going to need. You guess what they're familiar with, the other tools that they're using, why they're frustrating with them, and you include as many features as you can in a minimum of time, because of course people will pay for features, right? They will pay by the feature. The more features you have, the more they will pay. Probably a lot of these features will not be used. Once again, that's waste. You know it. You've seen it. That's what Scrum is all about. Okay? Just the right thing. Build just the right thing. Don't build things that people are not going to use. You know that. So that's a lot of wasted time and effort. But still, you want to do it. And you're a developer, so for you it's like free effort, right? You don't need to pay somebody to do it. You're paying yourself. This is what we call opportunity cost. While you're doing that, you're not doing something else. That might be worth more money. That might work better in the long term. Okay? So do not consider this as free effort. Value it. Put a figure on it. You'll be surprised. And it's really important to take that into account in your famous business plan. And then there's the big question. when the hell do you stop? It's like you're never satisfied. Okay, this is just too prototypey. I need to add this and add that and perfect this, and this button is not aligned. And most of the time, this is really low-level psychology here, but most of the time, it just means that you're afraid of showing it. And you find good reasons not to show it right away and to add new things. And this can really drag you down and kill your motivation and, of course, make you waste a lot of time. But okay, you've got your prototype, you're satisfied enough with it, you want to start showing it, but there's a risk. If you start showing it to people, then they'll know. They will want to do it, and maybe they have more money, they have more time on their hands. They will be able to do it faster and better than you. So you prepare this document with your lawyer, with your 300 euros an hour lawyer, and you start to write this document because you are afraid that somebody with more money will steal your idea, will do it for you, will do it instead of you. But the truth is, and once again, I'm sorry to break it to you guys, but good, original ideas don't exist. If it's a good idea, chances are somebody already had it. Probably 20 years ago when it was not even relevant. Probably tens of people are already working on it. So what do? Original ideas, I mean ideas that you're the first one to have, really? Bad sign. Smells. Because usually it means either that it's a bad idea, it's a terrible idea, or it's an excellent idea in 20 years from now. But you're not in 20 years from now. I know it was Back to the Future Day, anyway. But that's not the kind of thing that you want to do. Spend some time on an idea that's going to succeed in 20 years. Plenty of people have done that. So yeah, good and original ideas don't exist. And just to give you a little rule of thumb, that's from the Derek Sivers guy, so you can find that on his blog. This is a general formula just to give you an idea. An awful idea, -1, okay? Goes up to 20. And then you have to multiply that by the power of execution. It's all about execution. I'm sure you've heard that many times, but that is true. So that means that a very weak idea with a brilliant execution can be worth $1 million. A brilliant idea with no execution at all, $20. And that's true. That's well-known fact by all the people in the startup industry. Because yes, it's an industry. Anyway. So execution is really important. And by execution, I don't just mean code execution. I don't mean the percentage of time that you spend compiling and building and deploying and stuff. No, I mean strategy, making decisions, changing markets, adapting your product, doing marketing, all that energy and smart that you put in the project. That's really what has the most value, basically. But okay, you've got your non-disclosure agreement, so now you're pretty confident that nobody will talk about it, and that, yeah, your idea is protected. By the way, when you do that, it also means you don't get any valuable feedback. That's something that I always say to startup apprentices, I would say, who come to me with an NDA. I say, okay, how many people have you talked about your idea? Because if every one of them has had to sign an NDA, chances are you have no feedback at all, or very little value one. There is more to gain to talk about your ideas with others than to protect it. Believe me. Most people will just give you feedback about, yeah, I would need that, I would not need that, I would need it that way. But not a second they will think, yeah, I could do it. You're crazy like that. They're not. So forget about this NDA, really. Next step, now you can talk about your idea. You have your precious NDA, so let's raise angel funding. That's another of the cool words that you get to say when you're an entrepreneur, right? I got to meet this angel, the guy with the wings and so on. Well, just know that angel investors are really interested in those things. One, quality, passion, commitment, integrity. You've got all that, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. That's not a problem for you? Let's move on. Market opportunity and potential. Okay, how did I validate that? Market study, check. Business plan, check. Hockey stick curve, check. Is that enough? Do you think, once again, that those angel investors have not seen that hundreds of times and will not look further? Think twice. Business plan, okay, you get it. You wrote it, took you some time. And initial traction, another cool word, by the way. What does traction mean? Well, basically, it's proof. Proof that everything that you've written in your business plan, that everything that you've supposedly learned in your market study is not complete bullshit. It's actual proof that there are customers out there, that they want to use your product. And by customers, I don't mean free users. I don't mean your mom. I mean real users who just discovered you. You talked to them about it and they said, ah, yeah, that's a good idea, but it's actually more a good idea. It could really be useful to me and I'm going to use it for real. This is traction. This is what really, really matters. Not just words on a paper, but also real and most of the time paying users. Just to give you an idea, in the Valley there is a very well-known startup accelerator called Y Combinator. I really encourage you to look at their demo day presentation. Usually they're streamed online, and just look at their figures. They know what traction means. Those guys usually do 2-figure growth a week. And that's real growth, not projected growth. Okay? So think about that. There are sometimes, and most often than not, when we're talking about tech startups, they are looking for technology, innovative technology, and intellectual property. So if you have some patent spending, stuff like that, it's something that they might like. But usually, I mean, we all know software patents are not really a thing, right? Especially in Europe, anyways. So, might not be a good idea. Another thing that might seem positive, an appropriate valuation. What does that mean? Well, basically, they want to give you as little money as they can for as much value as they can. Valuation is just the theoretical projected value of your company. So if they give you 10,000 euros for 10% of your company, that means that the valuation of your company is 100,000. Which is very rare, by the way, at this stage with what you have in hands right now. Is this just a business plan, market study, and a prototype? Okay? So that means that usually what they will want to do is to lower the amount and up the percentage. And the more percent they take from your shares, the more control they will have over you, over the future, and over the next rounds as well. By the way, another thing that's interesting to them, exit strategies. Another cool word. What are exit strategies? Well, it just basically means I know that I won't make enough money from just the revenue of this company, and they don't count on it. Angel investors don't give a shit about the revenue of a company. All they're interested about is exits. What is an exit? Well, the most obvious one, acquisition. If they think that your product has the potential to be sold to another company someday, they're good. They're interested. And the higher the amount they think they can take out of it, the better for them. Usually, when they have this kind of expectations, they expect a company to do 10 times the investment. So if they put 100,000 in it, they expect 1 million out of it. Why? Well, because they know that if you succeed, they will have probably 10 failures beside that. So they have to make up for the failure rate. Another possible exit strategy, by the way, this one, acquisition, very rare in Europe. That's unfortunate, but there are not enough companies especially big companies, established companies, who buy a startup. Usually they reinvent the wheel, or they acquire startups elsewhere because they think they're more credible or something. But yeah, acquisition is not something that's very common in our countries. So another exit strategy, well, IPO, going public. Usually longer term. Usually it's not for tomorrow, it's not even for 5 years from now. It takes a long time to get there, and a lot of energy. And by the time you go public, if you're still there, if you're still CEO, you're lucky. And if you want to go see them, if you want to talk to them, well, you're going to need more than just a few documents, a nice smile, and a cool business card that says, I'm CEO, you know what. You're going to need a pitch deck. So that's basically some slides to show. Very concise, very effective, very straight to the point. You're going to need your prototype. Okay, you built it, so take it with you. It would be a shame not to show it. Okay, still you have it. And you need, yeah, what they call an elevator pitch. Why is that? Well, because you need to convince someone. You need to meet those angel investors, and most of the time they are very busy people. Because guess what? Everybody's after their money. You're not the only one. So if you want to convince them to hear you, to watch your pitch deck, to spend 30 minutes with you and give you some valuable feedback, you're going to need this pitch deck. And this is very hard to do. I've seen people work weeks and months over a pitch deck, validate it with other investors, with other entrepreneurs, and go over it over and again. Sorry, this sentence didn't make any sense, but you get the point. I think the most important part that you need to raise funding, you need introductions. This thing that I mentioned before about the elevator pitch, it's very inefficient. Believe me, I've tried. For the little story, with the first startup that I created, with my associate, we went to TechCrunch Disrupt. Big startup conference and event in the Valley in San Francisco. All the cool kids are there, all the investors are there. There's a startup contest, it's huge, it's really huge. And yeah, as I said, all the investors are there. And I was there with my associate, and at some point we noticed that behind the stage, where there were all the presentations, there was the VIP room. Translate, that's where all the money is. That's where all the guys are with the wallets full of cash, okay? All the checkbooks. So it took us about a few minutes to figure out with my associate, okay, we gotta do something, okay? Try something. And there was those two big black guys at the entrance, like, only if you have a certain color of badge. I tried something, okay? I went innocent like that. The guy was distracted, and by chance, I got to pass the door and to enter the VIP room. And right, maybe 2 meters beyond the door, right in front of Paul Graham. Some of you might know him. He's actually the creator of Y Combinator and one of the biggest angel investors in the US, period. The guy that, yeah, definitely has some money to spare. And might be interested in a startup. You know, you want to know how it ended? That's about it. That was it. I was out, and I just gave him my card, and actually he took the card and gave him to the assistant. Bad sign. So I went out of there, I was really enraged. But there's a second part to this story. I was so pissed off, I said, okay, I need some air. I go out of the building, and there was the founder of 500 Startups. Another big investor. Guess what? Bah, 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 bah. Anyway. Didn't have time to learn my lesson, so. Trust me, introductions. You need people who know these guys. You need people who with credibility, who can tell them you need to hear him out. He's got some really strong things going on. Those introductions are really, really precious, okay? So if you know some guys, Build those relationships. They are really, really important. But okay, let's say you've managed to overcome all these hurdles. You have you have a cool prototype, you have your NDA that protects you, you have your business plan, your market study, all those figures that you can display in your toilets or whatever. And you've got some angel money. Yay! 25,000 euros. About 2.5 months, 3 months worth of active working and marketing and all that, if you're lucky. So let's start testing on real customers, right? Because so far we've only built a prototype. We haven't sold it yet, so it's not a big deal. Build it and they will come. You've already built it, so now they will come. When we released our first website for the startup, we actually had an awesome, a huge business PR plan in place. Okay, we had just met one of the writers for TechCrunch in the US, and we thought, okay, let's chit-chat a little bit, and I'm going to pitch you my idea. Of course, the core business of TechCrunch is to pitch startups. They don't care if it works, if it doesn't work, if it's a good or bad idea. He liked it enough to put out an article for us, just the day when we released. We thought this is going to be huge. Will the servers hold? Our idea is so good. Thousands and thousands of people will just crush our servers. Well, guess what? The servers held fine. Either our performance was really good, or there was something wrong going on. Well, our biggest day ever, 1,500 people in a day. Guess what? They didn't come back. And when you're in that situation, when they come the first time and then they don't come back, well, how do you know what works and what doesn't? Why didn't they come back? Was it because they thought it was a terrible idea? Because they thought the execution was wrong? Because they didn't understand what it was? And actually that was the case for us. What is the reason? What are the features that they would have liked to find, but that they are disappointed because everything else makes your message blurry and they don't understand what it is? If it is for them, you don't know about that because you've just built a prototype. If you have thought of putting some Google Analytics in your website, then it's already a good thing. And then, okay, you've launched, you've put your site or your app out there, but did you think of a strategy? Of a launching strategy, of a marketing strategy? Do you know how you're going to grow? How you're going to support all those new customers that you hope you're going to have? That's also important. Because if people come, and even if they buy, and then they feel the support is not up to par, they will go. They will leave. There are plenty of competitors out there. Once again, there is no original idea. So chances are, what you're doing, somebody already started doing it a few months ago, and somebody will do it better than you tomorrow. So how will you cut through all the noise? Okay? It's a crowded space out there. You're not the first one to think of that. And what if it doesn't work at all? How can you come back? What can you try? What's your next move? That's also important. But okay, let's say you've overcome all that. Of course, the next step, under a pile of money. Everything that I've just told you. Once again, you're developers, and chances are a lot of you are Agile developers. Doesn't that ring a bell? Yes, the image means something. It's a little less far-fetched than the panda bear. So, what do you think? Don't you think there is a better way? Of course there is one. That's just a rhetoric question. Come on. No, there's no better way. That was it. Thank you. Bye. For another little story, when in 2011, early 2011, I had been a freelance for about a year. And for me, freelance had always been the first step towards creating my own startup one day. And I thought, okay, let's just first create a company and learn how to manage it, navigate all those accounting and taxes problems and so on. And one day, I'm going to stop working for my customers and start working on my own projects. 2011, the very first startup weekend was organized in Brussels. And a friend of mine said, okay, we should go. So, okay, come on. For those of you who don't know what a startup weekend is, it's basically 54 hours over a weekend, and you come out with startup. Woo! Of course. So you start on the Friday night, you introduce your idea, you pitch it to all the other guys, usually about 100 people there, and then you gather teams and you work on it over the weekend, and on Sunday night you pitch in front of investors. I mean, curious guys who are just there to show their business cards, but okay. And then you hope that you're going to win the special prize, which is a course in entrepreneurship. Yay. Anyway, but okay, I went there, said, okay, let's try something. A couple of days before, I thought, okay, all the side projects that I have, they're too big for 54 hours. So I'm going to find something very small, just for the experiment. And I was a big fan of Airbnb back then. And I was co-working all the time, so I thought, okay, let's try something like co-working, but for office space. Actually, I'm lying a little bit because a friend of mine who's in the room right now had the idea. Thanks, Said. But I thought, okay, let's do that. And I had a cool idea for a name. I'm going to call it Kodesk with a K because the C is not available in .com, but AK. And I pitched my idea, and we went over it over the weekend, and frankly, it was a nightmare. A team that you don't know, guys that are just working with you and you don't know from before, so you don't know if you can trust them and anything. So there are and it's a really intense experience. On Sunday afternoon, I was like, okay, I'm going to do the pitch. I'm going to go home and sleep for a week. I hadn't slept during the night from Saturday to Sunday, so I thought, okay, I'm going to sleep for a week. And I never want to hear about these guys anymore, and startup weekends are crap, basically. We did the pitch, and we won. So I wasn't expecting that. I took it like a kick in the butt, especially as there's one positive thing that I learned during the startup weekend. I discovered Lean Startup. I know it sounds like the miracle, right? Sing hallelujah. Anyway, so that was the one positive thing that came out of this, plus the kick in the butt that said, okay, now you have to do something with that. Even if it's not the right idea, you have to try something. And the day after, I went to my customers and I said, okay, guess what, guys? Over the course of the next few weeks, I'm going to decrease my involvement in the project and start working on my own. And then I tried. And that's when I started learning about Lean Startup for real, putting it in practice, trying it on different startups, coaching other startups about it. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about after the break, because it's already time for a break. So if it's okay for you, let's come back in 15 minutes. So that will be at 2:50. Thanks a lot. See you. One, two, and we're back. Okay, so now that we've talked about every reason why you would like to do it, why you would not do it, what would prevent you from doing it, and all the things that people usually do, and it's not necessarily the best idea ever, let's go back to Lean Startup to the rescue. Okay, so first step in Lean Startup ever. So just a word of warning here, I'm gonna throw a lot of truth from now on, okay? Take that with a grain of salt, that's my personal experience. That's also some parts of experience that I've learned, that I've heard around, but of course nothing is absolute, okay? But first lesson, as I said, in Lean Startup is humility. You know nothing, Jon Snow. That's really the most important thing. Actually, I could leave you here. Okay? That's, if you understand that, if you admit that, if you truly believe that, then we're good. But if you need a little more, let's upgrade your software. Okay. No, you're not going to learn Kung Fu. Hopefully you're going to learn a little bit about Lean Startup. The first thing that's really important, a startup is a learning organization. I hate it when people say that a startup is a company. No, it's not. It's really not. Even though you have to register a company at some point, it's not. It's not an existing business model. It's a research project. Once you have found a business model, once you have found an innovative way of making money with something, probably a tech product or another business model or whatever, then you have a company. But then it becomes a totally different business. And usually, very often, when you get to that point, you're not even in charge anymore. That's the when you get to that point, that's the kind of company that you sell to somebody, goes public, another CEO, and you go to La Barbade or something to enjoy pina colada. If you're lucky, that is. Okay? So it's a learning organization. But more importantly, it's not just learning as people usually think of it. It's validated learning. And this loop is at the core of everything. Validated learning is basically like every, how could you say, moderated system. Okay? You have ideas, you build them into a product, you measure the success. From there you get data. Okay, it's an experiment, and from the data you learn new ideas, and it goes round and round. The smaller the loop, the less things you hypothesize and learn on each loop, the better. Because if you mix all the experiments together, it's going to be very hard to learn from it. Okay, so this validated learning loop is the most important thing. In the Lean Startup, that's what people do all the time and keep doing it years after years. Airbnb, they're worth tens of billions of dollars now. They're still doing it now. Brian Chesky, the CEO, is still going, sleeping in Airbnb places to people who don't know him, of course, and asking around, trying to learn, trying new experiments. I've got this new product that I would like to show you. What do you think about it? He still does it. Dropbox, the same. They're trying new things all the time. Facebook, not a company that started especially following Lean Startup principles, because I think Lean Startup didn't really, I mean, it's not that it didn't exist, because it's always existed somehow, but it was not formalized. But even now, they have special features that they only release to a small group of people to validate it before they release it. That's validated learning. Okay? So the next question, of course, is if you are iterating like that, looping over, trying to learn as much as possible, the next question is how not to lose yourself spinning, how not to get dizzy of all this pivoting, because that's what pivoting is. A lot of people mix and confuse pivoting with changing everything. Okay, so that's just a way to demystify this bad word. No, pivoting is not, yeah, yesterday I was doing this platform to put dog owners in relationship with niche sellers or something, and today I'm doing refrigerators. No, that's not pivoting. Okay, pivoting is keeping one foot fixed and turning around. Not like that. That's not pivoting, and that's what gets you dizzy. Okay? If you want to keep some things, some elements fixed and not get dizzy, there are a few questions to ask yourself, your co-founders if you have any, and I strongly advise you to have one. The first one is, who are you? Who are you guys? What are your values? What defines you? Profoundly. Usually those things don't change that much over life. Okay, this what you were born with or what you learned as a kid, or yeah, it's part of who you are. I'm somebody perfectionist, or I care deeply about people. Those are the kind of things that you want to know, because those are the things that will probably change the less while you are spinning around. Second important thing, what's your mission? Your mission as an individual, but also your mission as a team. What do you want to bring into this world? Why do you want to do the things you do? Why do you want this startup? And this reason, this light at the end of the tunnel, will remain there. There are plenty of ways to reach the same goal. Okay? There are plenty of ways to implement your purpose. So ask yourself this. I know all this might sound very philosophical and somehow, okay, come on, I just want to sell my special system that I just developed. No, it's more than that. If you don't do that, then it's very hard to succeed. It's very hard to succeed on the long run and to bear all those rotations. And yeah, the vision. How are you going to do those things? Okay, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to build a tech product? Do you want to build a service firm? Do you want to, I don't know, just a general vision. Okay, of course, the more accurate it is, the more it is likely to change over time. But still, have a general vision. Imagine yourself in, I don't know, 3 to 5 years from now. What do you see yourself working on? Who do you see yourself collaborating with? This is really important questions. And again, not just for yourself, but also for your colleagues if you have co-founders. And in all that, don't forget that the goal is to find a business model. A startup is not a company yet, but it is a business, or at least an aspiring business. The goal is to make money. The goal is to sustain it, not just to get rich, but just because if you want to grow, if you want to satisfy and to solve the problems of as many people as possible, you need to make it sustainable. Yes, you will find some investors along the way willing to give you money like, nah. But that won't be enough. If it's just that, then it means that for them, it won't be worth it. And at some point, they will stop flowing the bills around. Okay? So don't forget that it's all about 3 things. Finding customers. And by customers, I don't mean just users, not subscribers. Once again, this is cool for your pride. This is cool for when you wake up in the morning, yeah, we have 2,000 users. They don't pay, but we have 2,000 users. Customers are those who pay. Facebook's customers are not the 1.2 billion or 1.3, I don't know where they are now, users that go on the site every day. It's frustrating because, yeah, that's all they're working on. I mean, most of the energy of Facebook developers is dedicated to satisfy those 1.x billion users. But actually, what you should really care about are customers. The guys who pay, the guys who take the bills out of the pocket. Once you have a customer, you need to figure out what their problems are. Even better if you figure out what their big one problem is. The simpler, the better. And I know, usually when I say that, people think, yeah, but for example, Facebook, does it solve a real problem? Not to you, but to advertisers. Come on. Before that, all they had to target their ads was Google AdWords and the searches of people in search bar. Now they know about their friends, they know about what they care about, they know the communities that they've joined. This is huge. This has huge values. For them, it solves a huge problem. Sometimes it's hard to see this, because once again, you think of your users as if they were their customers, your customers. And yeah, you can solve something, but it's not really a problem. It's more like, yeah, it's nice to be able to know if my high school girlfriend is getting fat or something. Yeah, that's not the problem. So focus on customers with real problems. And then, of course, if you just have customers and problems, it's not good enough. You need to find a proper solution. And a proper solution is not just a technical solution. It's not just a product. It's a whole package. It's how you solve the problem. It's how much you make them pay. It's how often you make them pay. All that is part of the solution. It's how you distribute it to them. It's how you support your users, your customers, once they have paid. It's how you keep them around and prevent them to go to the competition. All that is really important. And these three aspects, customer, problem, solution, it's the short-cut version of a business model. If you have those three things, that's the good foundation. So, how do we go about finding those? Just a generic process. Again, it's not an absolute rule, and you can adapt this. I mean, like Agile methodologies and so on, it's just a basis, and you can adapt. First, start with customer and problem. If you already have the solution, step back. Go back to finding a customer with a problem. Put your idea in the fridge. Maybe it will be good. Maybe while you're trying to find a customer and a problem, you will notice that, okay, this idea, not so good after all. And there are plenty of very good examples about those. So, once again, find a customer with a problem. That's the first step. Once you have that, you have a strong problem and a real problem with real customers, of course. Find a solution that solves this problem for this customer, and the important part is the second part of the sentence, to the point where they are ready to pay. We'll talk about it, but the hard truth is most customers are not ready to pay for nice-to-haves. It's cruel that way, but it's true most of the time. You need to find something that is a real problem to them, and it's so much a problem for them that they don't have a way around it. And if you provide them with an alternate solution, something simpler, something easier, they will pay for it. It will be worth it. And of course, when I'm saying that, I'm not thinking just of B2C applications, not just thinking of end consumers. So I'm also thinking of companies and managers in big companies, especially B2B stuff. Once you have found the solution, and obviously you've developed it to the point that it's practical and you can start to get customers, okay, you have paying customers, then another cool expression, product market fit. What does that mean? Very easy. It just means that your business is scalable. You need to get to the scalable point. If you have a solution that's really good and you have paying customers, but you have already exhausted all the customers you could find in a given area, and it's very hard to reproduce somewhere else, you don't have a startup. You have what we call a lifestyle business. And maybe it's good enough. Maybe that's all you need. If you just want to sustain yourself and your dream team and keep building a cool product, I mean, fine. There's no need to go to build a startup and become rich and involve plenty of investors. It can be good. But product market fit is the key step to reach for a startup. Once you've reached that, then you can scale up. Then you can start thinking about strategies on how to reproduce that in other contexts, in other cities, in other countries, in other languages, for other communities. Because usually you start small and then you start expanding to other targets. Okay? Usually, when I coach startups, I like to start with a simple exercise. The elevator pitch. This is a canvas for a very simple, very basic, very generic, but very powerful elevator pitch. If you can find strong elements for all these, you're in a good shape to start. And usually it forces you to think about some things. So my company, Kodesk, is developing a marketplace to help independent workers find flexible workspaces at a low price, something like that. That's an example. I just came up with it. No, I'm kidding. Kodesk was the first startup I created, so it's actually a real elevator pitch that we had. So the first step, company name. Just discussed it with somebody, actually. Don't spend too much time on it. It's important, it's nice to talk about it with your family, with your friends, with people you meet, but usually you're good enough if you start with a good code name, okay? Don't focus too much on it, because chances are your product is going to change so much that sooner rather than later, your product name will have nothing to do with your product anymore. So don't get too attached to it, okay? Be pragmatic about it. Don't spend more than a few hours, a few days maybe. Ask around, talk to people about it. Don't be afraid, once again, that they are going to steal your name or something. Just try to find something that is easy to remember. And yes, that is available already. It could be a hurdle if you find this crazy name and you don't have I don't know, any domain name forever. I mean, the .com is already taken. All the countries where you thought that you would release your initial product, the domain name is already taken, and somebody else is already doing what you are doing with the same name. So just find something that is available and be pragmatic about it. One thing, always beware of cultural bias. I'm always amazed when I mean, the first time I heard that Audi came out with an e-tron car. Come on. In French, do you know what that means? What an e-tron is? And they have teams of marketing guys thinking about these things. So think about the cultural bias around your name. And think ahead. Think big. Yes, today you're starting in, I don't know, Brussels or in a small city in whatever country, but your goal is to grow. You're in a startup, so the goal is to go abroad and try somewhere else and probably go global at some point. So don't figure that your domain name in French.fr is going to get you on the long run. Maybe you can change at some point, but changing name when you have a good brand and so on can be hard, so think ahead. And yes, try to find something easy to remember. That's the key. Even if it's just a code name that's going to change every few days, but if it's something easy to remember, oh yeah, I know this guy from I want to build a cool database.com. Okay, that's easy to remember? No, not really. And sometimes it's even worse than that. And it's actually a very dangerous aspect when you're a developer. You're in contact with so many acronyms that you tend to come up with new ones. So a good resource for that, just a tip, domainer.com. When you type an idea for a name, it gives you all the declinations of possible domain names that are available or not. Just keep that. There's even an iPhone app if you want to find a name on the train. Why not? Second part of your elevator pitch, define offering. Okay, I'm going to break another truth to you guys. A platform is not a defined offering. What I mean by defined offering, it's a website, it's a mobile app, it's a mailing list, whatever. But it's not a platform. Even what I used earlier, a marketplace, is already too vague. If you want to explain to somebody very quickly what you're doing, they need to know exactly what it is. A platform is, it doesn't mean smart. It doesn't mean big. It means I don't know what I'm doing. And what's even more important, think beyond mobile apps and websites. I think I hate it at least as much when people pitch me a mobile app than when they pitch me a platform. Because there are plenty of mobile apps, and mobile apps are expensive to build. They're they're not the best first step for a startup, anyway. They're not the best first iteration, the first version of a product. So think of concierge mode. It's usually an excellent way to learn. It's not scalable. You're only going to be able to serve, I don't know, 10, 20 customers. Think about mailing lists, phone numbers, doing it yourself. This can be good enough. I always take this one example I found completely amazing. There's, in the US, I mean now it's coming to the Europe as well, there's this site called Angel List. It's basically a website to put investors in contact with startups who are looking for money. Pretty easy, right? You know how they started? Just a mailing list. That's all. They just invited a couple of investors they knew to join the mailing list, a couple of entrepreneurs, and it was good enough as a starting point. They didn't need a website. It took them maybe 2 days to put together. Just send the invites, put the mailing list in place, a moderation process, and that was good. Of course, it wouldn't have taken them far enough, but it was good enough to start. And they learned a lot. Your first goal is not to reach as many people as possible, it's to reach as few people as possible, but get qualitative feedback. That's the key. So yeah, concierge mode is an excellent way to learn. And it's not because you can that you should. Yes, you are developers, and you can probably build a forum website or a great marketplace in a few days, even though you know that those few days are going to turn into a few weeks and then a few months, and you know how it works, right? But once again, it's not because you can that you should. So be efficient, be pragmatic, be lean. That's what it's all about. Be creative. As I said, mailing lists, forums, phone numbers, blogs, even brick and mortar. I had this great discussion with a guy earlier who said, yeah, I want to build this amazing shop system and network and so on. Okay, open a shop yourself. Try. See how your customers are going to react to it. This is really what matters, getting feedback. That's the most important thing, not the scalability at first. Remember, scale up is the last step. Pen and paper are your friends. They're a very good way to validate stuff. Once you have learned a few things, you can start to design solutions, you can show it to people with just pen and paper. I always take this example of a very innocent startup in the US. They built a new radio player, something that you can embed on your website. You know how they validated it? Before building it, the guy was in a Starbucks cafe every single day for a month with pen and paper. He drew an interface, put it in front of people and said, okay, how would you interact with that? What does it do? How would you play something? They tried. First guy, okay, this goes to the bin, try another iteration, show it to another guy. And he did that every day for a month. Now it's working very well for him. So pen and paper are your friends. The first thing that you want to reach is a minimum testable product. Okay, what is the minimum amount of effort that you can put into something that can be presented to people, to receive feedback, to test your hypothesis, to do experiments. And then once you have the minimum testable product, then you can start talking about minimum viable product. Viable meaning, okay, it's actually something I can sell, something people will pay for, something usable in some ways. But once again, it's not because it's a step beyond that you have to spend that much effort into it. Okay, so we've talked about the name, the defined offering, next step, the target audience. I talked about it earlier, but the world is the worst starting point. Yes, of course, everybody wants to end war and spread love. Again, help the world. But every successful startup that I know that went to solve a big problem for the entire world started with a small niche. And there's a reason for that. Not just because it's a matter of how many people you can solve a problem for at first. It's also because before getting to solving problems for the world, you need to learn a few things. And every step along the way, every niche, from the smaller to the biggest, teaches you something. And there's no way around this. There's no shortcut. You cannot cut through this. You have to go on every step. favor quality over quantity. Again, your target audience doesn't need to be big at first. The more feedback they give you, the higher value you gather. Once again, your first goal is not to make money, even though that's your end goal. Your first goal is to learn how to make money. So quality trumps quantity. Think in terms of growth strategy. Again, and it's not something that you necessarily need to think ahead of time. Do you really think that Zuckerberg, when he started Facebook, the Facebook, he wanted to make it what it is today? He didn't have a clue. He just knew what his next move, maybe his next 2 moves. Okay, today we started with frustrated students in Harvard. Tomorrow is going to be all the students in Harvard. Maybe the day after tomorrow we're going to go to Stanford. All the universities in the US. And it's starting to catch on with general population, but just the young ones. So, okay, these steps are as important as the rest. And what you want to find at first are what we call early evangelists. Cool mind trick. Those are the guys who are going to do your marketing for you. They are so convinced, they are so they need your solution so much that they're going to talk about it. Maybe you will lose them later. Twitter lost a lot of their early evangelists when they started to, cater for the announcers, for the advertisers, and so on. But you shouldn't be too attached to them, but you need to find them. They're the ones who are going to bootstrap your thing, help you along, and find your first paying customers. Once again, start with a niche. This is really important. And remember that customers are different from users. If you're lucky, they're the same. That's the easiest model ever. If you can find users who are going to use your product and pay for it at the same time, kudos. That's a good one. Truth is, once again, the innovation lies more in the business model than in the product itself. And yeah, the more sometimes now business model tends to sophisticate, and marketplaces with all directions. For example, Take It Easy, startup that I know pretty well. We're working with restaurants, with bike couriers, and with customers. That's 3 different communities with completely different needs, and we need to articulate all that and make sure that everybody is satisfied. That's hard, but that's innovation in terms of business model. That's where the money is. And when you think about your target audience, if you want to sort them out, to know where you should start, pain level is king. If you can find someone for which the problem you want to solve is really, really painful, that's the first thing that you should value. Second, ease of reach. The easier it is for you to find those customers, to get to them, to reach them, to show them your solution, the better. The price they're willing to pay is third, usually. And only in fourth position, market size, the number of people. So that's good learning as well. Now let's talk about the problem. Once again, something I already said, but repetition is easier to remember. Customers won't pay for nice to have, only a must have. I know it's cruel, and we all like to think that we are developers. We're fascinated by technologies and gadgets, and yeah, of course I need this latest gizmo. I won't use it, but I need it. I think I have something like 3 different Pebble watches. Now I have an Apple Watch, and I paid so much for it that, yeah, of course I need it. Of course it's very useful. It's called the consistency principle. Marketers know that very well. The higher you pay, the more you're likely to say, yeah, it's a good buy. I'm really satisfied by it. Okay, anyway. So, yeah, must-haves are easier to market, they're easier to develop, they're easier to evolve than nice-to-haves. And yeah, they're easier to sell, which is what you want to do. In terms of problems, an interesting classification is shark bite versus mosquito bite. A shark bite is very rare, but it's very painful. On the other hand, mosquito bites all the time. It happens very often, but it's very small. You can work around it. Usually, shark bites are better to start with than mosquito bites. Once again, just a rule of thumb, but it's good to identify both. And yeah, it's a good visualization also to keep in mind. The only exception, valid exception, I say, to the necessity of finding a problem is probably entertainment, because then the problem is very generic. I'm bored. I need this game. I need this movie, whatever. So yeah, entertainment is a valid exception to this model of the necessity to find a problem. But that's the only one. Facebook is not an exception, as I said. It's just, it is if you're looking in the wrong direction. If you think that the customers of Facebook are the users, then yeah, of course, you're not solving a real problem. You're mostly entertaining them. So yeah, think shark bite versus mosquito bite. Okay. The last aspect of the elevator pitch is the secret sauce. In a word, the secret part is kind of misleading because it doesn't need to be a secret. Once again, think about the NDA that you can wipe your ass with. Anyway, it's not necessarily a secret, and the more you talk about it, the more you learn. You get good feedback. It doesn't need to be different. Difference for the sake of difference doesn't matter. If you have something different but nobody wants it, what good is it? So, once again, what's interesting in that, in the sauce aspect, is that it's a unique combination of ingredients. It's something that only you could build, but because you have this unique combination of knowledge, market knowledge, and network, and tech skills, and I mean, this secret sauce is what matters. The secret sauce is something that's hard to copy, something that's hard to reproduce. Even if you had to patent it, it's this recipe that you hold in a safe somewhere, like the Coke recipe, you know? That's really what matters. And usually, a secret sauce has a unique connection to its cook. It's you. You matter as well in the recipe, because you are the one who cooked it. You have this history because it's your grandma that showed you how to cook that. Or, I mean, if we want to leave the metaphor, it's just that your experience led you to learn all that, to know all that. Okay, enough for the generic principles. Do you have some questions at this point before we move on to talking about the real tools? No? Don't see any? Okay, let's move on. As I said, if you are used to lean, agile methodologies and so on, you are looking for the information radiator. In Scrum, that is your sprint board. In Kanban, that's your Kanban board. Guess what? We also have a board. What you want to evolve in a lean startup is your business model as a whole, all the aspects of it. So basically, we want to replace the business plan, which you can see as the equivalent of the big upfront design specification document kind of thing, by something that you can easily evolve, easily iterate over, easily visualize, display on a wall somewhere, stick post-it notes on it. Yay, we gotta use those 3M things again. I'm sure you were looking for another opportunity to use your stock. Anyway. So, there are a lot of important aspects in there, and we're going to go over them one by one because they're really, really key. There's an order. Once again, it's a rule of thumb, but it's a generic rule that works pretty well. the first thing to care about is this one, the customer segments. Okay? By the way, customers are on this side, problems are on the other side, solution is in the middle. You can find your customer problem solution components. Usually, you need, when you're thinking about that, you need to find a name for your customers. That's usually a good idea to refer to them more easily, okay? Rather than generic things like, I don't know, 20-year-old secretaries, or I don't know what it can be. Find them a name. Patricia. Be creative, okay? By the way, those are the key elements of a customer persona. It's also another technique to define a customer target. So you start with a name, think of the behaviors. Okay, what does she do? Patricia, when she goes to work every morning, what does she do? In what order? Of course, try to stay relevant. But on the other hand, don't think only about what does she do when she's looking for an office to work. No. Think wide, okay? That's where the opportunities lie. Don't remain blindfolded and see only what you want to see. Think of all the behaviors that might be relevant to you. Oh, sorry. Didn't want to go that fast. Okay. The needs are also important. Okay. Beyond what she does, care about what she needs. Maybe she needs something that she cannot do and it remains a frustration, and that's also important to identify. But the needs are key. Maybe she finds another way to solve those needs. Maybe violence. No, that's not a good way. That's never a good way. As they say, violence is never the solution. And then Chuck Norris says that's because you don't hit strong enough. Anyway. And the goals in life, the goals for the day, the goals to, does she want to take care of her children? Does she want to make a career? Does she want to earn a lot of money? Does she want to earn respect from her peers? Whatever. What does she want in life? And then the facts and figures. Okay, how old is she? How many kids does she have? What is her job? Once again, those are generic things. Okay, but it's just to visualize who your customer is and what their problems are and how you're going to be able to integrate in their universe, because that's what you want to do. Once you figure that out, written that on a few post-it notes with just a few words per post-it note, of course. Next step, think about the problem. What are the 3 most pressing problems that you think this person has? Okay? At this point, it might just be assumptions. It's okay, because your goal is going to be to validate those assumptions with experiments. And we're going to show you how to do that. Okay? Limit yourself to just 3 problems, the 3 most important ones. If you don't have a must-have problems in those 3, then of course you won't have it further down the list. Think in terms of what's the most painful for Patricia. And another interesting aspect when you think about problems is, how does my customer solve these problems already? Sometimes it's with another product, a competitor of yours. Sometimes this competitor is an email, a phone call, a stepmother, whatever tinkering thing that she's been working on. An Excel sheet. Excel sheets are workarounds for lots of problems. You wouldn't believe it. There are some people who manage their personal accounts in Excel sheets. Come on, like it was designed for that. Anyway, so yeah, think of alternatives. Why is it interesting? Because later on you will have to position yourself related to those alternatives. You will have to replace them somehow. You will have to price your solution better than those alternatives. And these are some key elements to know what you're up against. Third element that's interesting when you think about a business model is the middle one. No surprise there, customer, problem, solution. Customer, problem, solution. Anyway. The easiest way to express your solution is to try and think of what the tagline of your website might be. Just one sentence that says, "This is for you, Patricia." And then Patricia goes to your website and says, "This is for me." And then she stays and she keeps reading. How do you get a hook on her? Okay, that might not be the right expression. Anyway. How do you express your value proposition in the most concise and accurate way? Another good way to think about it, even though it's not something that you should brag too much about, but we are the, I don't know, Airbnb for dogs. Man, have we heard of those. Or we are the Uber for pigs, whatever that would mean. But that's also a good way to think, to get related or linked to what people already know. Might be precious. Even though that's not something that you want published in the press, because then everybody belittles what you're doing. I don't remember how long Uber has been called the Airbnb for taxi drivers before everybody started being called the Uber for something. It took them a long time to get out of this reputation. Fourth aspect, now that you know in general what message reaches your customer and makes your customer think that this is for them, how will you implement this value proposition? Usually it's a good idea to think of one key feature for each of the key problems that you have identified in the first, meaning the second step, in the first cell on the left. And that's really usually the hardest part for developers, to figure out what those 3 features are, because usually you think of at least 3 features for each problem. And that's a small number. So once again, it's about being concise, it's about being lean, finding those 3 problems, key features is already hard enough. And as Tim Cook once said, the hardest part is to remove, not to add. Okay, I'm glad I placed a Tim Cook quote. I can say to my kids, I've done that one day. Next, most important aspect, how are you going to make people aware of your solution, distribute it, support your customers? It's not, I mean, if you have a solution that you don't know how to get it into the hands of people, or just to make them aware it exists, how is it worth anything, right? So this is, the channels aspect is really important as well. But you see, it comes later in the process. Now that we have figured all that out, let's start thinking about how much we're going to get out of this from each customer. Do we think of a subscription model? Is it something that they're going to pay once in their life and then forget about it? There are plenty of creative ways of doing something in this particular aspect. By the way, freemium is in there as well, because every non-paying customer is supposed to bring you something. Okay, so think about that as well. The next step is always to think about what's your cost structure. Okay, what is going to cost money? Once again, don't forget to put yourself in that. It's not because you are a developer and you can do it yourself that it's for free. It is not. Whilst you're developing, you're not doing marketing, you're not doing strategy, and all that has some value for your business model as well. So don't forget about that. It used to be that hosting costs were a big thing. Now we have Amazon Web Services, so who cares? But don't forget about human costs, of course. You are going to need to pay yourself a salary, probably to pay your co-founders a salary, to pay for office space, administrative costs, marketing. Those Facebook ads aren't going to pay for themselves. So this is also important. Usually this comes at this stage because the channels are going to cost, building the solution is going to cost. And all of that gets into that reflection. Okay? And at this point, since you have both bottom cells filled in, you know how you're going to make money and how much money it's going to cost, it's time to start reconciling both. Mostly, how many customers do I need to pay a subscription to offset those costs? Is it realistic? That's also what we call a very simple profits and losses element. You can start thinking about, is my business model viable? Can I find, I mean, if you need 10 billion customers paying your $1 subscription to pay because it costs $10 billion to build, then you're in the bad shape. You might have to wait a few years to get there. And even more to reach those 10 billion customers. But that's a detail, right? We have Facebook. Free marketing, no. Social media. Anyway, next step, how will you measure success? In every experiment, if you don't measure your results, then what good is the experiment? There's no way to adapt, there's no way to learn, there's no way to improve if you don't know what works and what doesn't. So how are you going to measure? What figures are you going to watch? And no, the number of registered users is not a valid metric. It's usually a vanity metric, unless all your registered users have to pay. But that's rarely the case, especially in those sophisticated freemium marketplace multi-sided models that we come up with. Okay, so valid elements might be number of returning users, that's called retention rate, or how much does it cost to get one given user to my website. Usually there's one set of metrics that's very popular. It's called the pirate metrics. I really encourage you to Google that. It's called pirate metrics because the acronym is ARG, literally. It's acquisition, activation, retention, referral. Yeah, I think those are. I probably missed one, but go there. It's good, usually good inspiration to fill in that box. And the last, but not least, is your unfair advantage. What's your unfair advantage? It's something that is hard to copy or reproduce. It's not a big deal if at first you don't find anything to put in there. Don't put something in there just for the sake of it, okay? It will come with time. Your market knowledge, your address book, you have some patents, you have anything that's hard to copy can go into that box. Okay, so going over all those in order can help you a lot. And once again, it's something that you can draft pretty easily. Once you are used to it, it's something that you could put together in about 1 hour for a given customer target, even less. Very hard, very easy to draft. We are far away from the weeks or months it can take you to write a business plan, and it has all the same information, just more accessible and easier to iterate over. By the way, what I've just shown you is called a lean canvas. It's just one of the many variants that exist of a information radiator for a lean startup. There's also the business model canvas. In my opinion, it's less adapted to the kind of products that we developers tend to build. It's more adapted to existing businesses who want to evolve towards something else. But there are other variants as well. There are variants that are more adapted to creative thinkers, to designers. There are other variants for very specific kinds of product. Of course, it's going to be harder to think in terms of the key features of a drug, for example. That's another kind of product. Or in terms of when you're thinking of a specific consulting service, for example. You might have to make variants of these. For example, I had to design a variant of this canvas for a political party recently. And I had to change some of the elements, but the general principle is there. Something that you can easily display on a wall and fill in with post-it notes and think over and iterate over with time. Okay? Another important aspect, once again, you know nothing, Jon Snow. So all those, everything that you can put in this board, these are just assumptions at this point. And you need to validate those. How do you validate those hypotheses? Well, with experiments. That's one of the things that I liked the most when I discovered Lean Startup at first, is that it's an experimental method. It's very scientific in this way. Sometimes, some people might think it's even too scientific. It lacks some emotion, some aspects like that. Believe me, you will have plenty of time to inject some emotion in there. But being able to come back to something more scientific from time to time is really, really reassuring. And it guides you through all the rest. So, just an example process for experiments. A process that I really like personally, because I know it's hard for developers to go through it, but it can be incredibly powerful. The first one, try to brainstorm all the possible niches, okay? All the possible customer targets that you might want to reach. You might be thinking of a big one, like, I don't know, I want to build something for lawyers. Okay, get more specific, get down in there. Young lawyers, established lawyers, lawyers in law firms, independent lawyers, student lawyers, I don't know. Try to get down to the details, okay? Try to specify your niche. Once you have done that, try to cherry pick 3 of them, just based on your gut feeling. Which ones do you think have the most potential? Just, once again, that's a good occasion to bring in some emotional aspect to it. You gotta start somewhere anyway, okay? So why not do it with some that you feel might have some potential? Just pick 3. For those 3, now it's time to take out your big poster boards, your business model canvas, your lean canvas, or whatever you want to use. And draft one canvas for each of those targets. You might think that the problems of an established lawyer are the same as the problems of a student lawyer. They're not. And it's only by doing that exercise that you can figure it out. And you can start thinking, okay, no, it's pretty specific. The problems are not the same. If the problems are not the same, the solutions are not the same. The channels to reach them are not the same. You're not going to be able to get the same price to pay out of each community. Okay? So really go through with the exercise. I know it's really easy to think, yeah, but they all have the same problems. Believe me, they don't. And then, once again, we got to start somewhere, and it's really generally a bad idea to mix experiments together, so it's better to start with one experiment, and if we have to choose, then it's time to inject some science into it. So first, pain level, we already said that. Pain level is the most important thing. Second, ease of reach. Okay, you don't need to find many potential customers to experiment with, but you need to find them easily, otherwise you're going to waste time trying to get appointments, to meet them, to ask them questions. The easier it is for you to find them, the better. The leaner you get, basically. Next aspect, how much they're going to potentially pay for the solution that you have, and then the market size. Usually what I do to do those things, I just do some kind of planning poker equivalent with a few friends. I say, okay, I want to evaluate the pain level of the, I don't know, student lawyers, established lawyers, and independent lawyers, for example, if those are my 3 cherry-picked targets. Give me an estimation from 1 to 5. Okay, usually if it's 0, it has nothing to do here. But okay, for each aspect, for the pain level, estimation of 1 to 5 for each target. Just guessing. Same thing for ease of reach, same thing for price, same thing for market size. And then I give a weight. Very simple Excel sheet. Yay, again, Excel sheet. And then I get a score for everyone. The highest score wins, and that's where I start. Very easy. Once again, those are assumptions, so they might prove wrong, but it's a good starting point anyway. So choose the first one, and now it's time to start doing the experiments indeed. First off, list your assumptions. Okay, you've normally drafted a lean canvas or any canvas for each of those 3 targets. So focus on the most important things to validate first. If you remember correctly, you need to find the right combination of customer, problem, solution. Start with customer and problem. So actually what you want to validate first are the elements on the right and the elements in the left box. That's it. First. So list your hypothesis in terms of who your target is. Okay. Of course, don't validate their first name, because if you only limit to customers called Patricia, you're going to be in a bad shape. Okay, there aren't that many Patricias out there, especially if you're targeting, I don't know, a very specific population. But anyway, so who your target is in terms of age, in terms of how many kids they have, in terms of what their revenue is, and so on and so forth. All the criteria that make sense for you. Just give, okay, I'm assuming that my customer he's between 20 and 25 years old, and she's a low student, she's a woman, okay, it's an interesting factor. She has a dog, might not be that relevant for your solution, but that's your call. List those hypotheses as assumptions that you want to either confirm or infirm. Okay, it's a yes or no. Very easy. And then the other aspects that you also want to list as hypotheses are what the problems are. Okay, you think that this customer, this specific population, has problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, in order of pain level. Okay. And of course, they are all must-haves. Otherwise, they would not be here in your list. And all this, you need to confirm it with your experiments. So how those problems are ordered, once again, in terms of pain level, and what their alternatives are. So that's quite a list of hypotheses to validate in the first step already. And believe me, that's enough. If you start mixing, validating the solution, the pricing, how you're going to reach them, in the first step, that's too much. You're going to mix too many things together. Usually those 2 things are already pretty big. Once you have listed your hypothesis, the next step, of course, is to validate those. And once again, I know that's something that can be hard for some developers, and once again, I am a developer, so I get your pain, is to reach out, to find some real people who are going to tell you their story, answer your question. At this point, you don't need to build anything. You don't even need to draw anything. You just need to meet some people, ask them the right questions, listen to them, listen to their problems, listen to their stories, and write them down. Okay? This is your validation. This is the user story writing part. At this point, you're not building anything yet. You're just doing the product owner job. So try to find at least 5 people to interview. Once again, it's just a rule of thumb, but yeah, it's a good starting point. Not because you will only interview 5 people, but it's just the starting point, and usually each of those people will refer you to, yeah, I know this guy, I know my cousin, my stepmother, whatever. They have the same problem, and you might want to meet them and ask them the same questions. So it's a good starting point. Find five people. If you have a hard time finding those 5 people, it means you screwed up something in your sorting somehow, because that means that this population is really hard to reach for you. So they might not be the right one to start with. I don't know about you guys, but I hate it when people come to me on the street and ask me to fill in a survey and answer a few questions. Yeah, I always have something to do. I guess you do too. So try to schedule interviews. Usually people are more available. And if you present this as an opportunity for them to complain, believe me, they will come. They will say, yes, sure, we can have a cup of coffee. Try to avoid paying or compensating people in any way for accepting to answer your questions, because usually it introduces some bias in their answers. But yeah, just call them out and try to see if they would have 30 minutes, 45 minutes is usually enough for this kind of interview. They are called problem interviews for a very simple reason, because at this point all you want to validate is that this customer has some problems that you might be interested in knowing about. Okay? At this point, they're problem interviews, so don't try to sell anything. If you try to sell something and say, yeah, but by the way, would you need a solution that does that? You're just trying to confirm something. At this point, you're exploring. You want to learn what the problems are. You don't want to learn if your solution is valid already. Okay? And it's really good to separate both, because it's usually not the same thing. And you will discover things that you didn't even expect. It's really important during those interviews to be able to watch, not just to listen to the words they say, but also to watch their attitude, how they react. If you say, for example, I think it's very hard for, I don't know, student lawyers to find a proper apartment, for example. And they say, yes, it's a big problem. You have some very important information there. If you just listen to them, you might miss it. But the visual aspect, the non-verbal aspect, is at least as valuable as the rest. That's the qualitative part. So that's why it's always interesting to do those interviews with somebody else. Somebody asks the question, another one takes notes. This way you have the verbal aspect and you also have the qualitative feedback that goes with it. And they're synchronized. And then you can debrief and learn some valuable lessons. And at the end of those interviews, always ask for referrals. Once again, it's the easiest way to reach those people. Usually they know similar people, and once you've started to talk about problems, they naturally think of other people they know who have similar problems. And that's really valuable for you, because then you won't have to find more and to spend some time finding more. Okay? So don't forget to ask for that. And also ask for, if those people, I mean the person you're meeting right now, you're asking her questions and she's answering and so on, ask her if she's okay for you to come back to her later. That also will be precious. Because once you have found a proper problem, hopefully for this specific customer, you might have to pivot, you might have to change the customer, but if you don't, if you just pivot around the problems, then it might be good to come back with a solution later and say, okay, would you be interested in me coming back with a possible solution? I can't tell you what it is now because I have no clue. You have no clue, right? So ask her if she's okay for you to come back. This is also very efficient as a way to find interviewees. And then it's time to validate hypothesis. Okay? So once again, it's just a rule of thumb, but every 10 interviews, try to debrief, to adapt. Okay, was I right? If I take my list of hypotheses back, what have I validated or invalidated? What can I forget about? Okay, maybe it's not the 2025, it's just the 2022, because there are still students after 22, they have a different context, and I've learned that. That's good. Every invalidated hypothesis is at least as precious as the validated ones. Don't try to confirm what you think you already know. Okay? So every 10 interviews about something like that, try to come back. Adapt and iterate. If at this point you already notice that, yeah, there's something wrong, then change something. Not everything. Don't change your problem and your customer at the same time. Once again, it's a pivot. It's not spinning around, otherwise you'll get dizzy. Just adapt one thing and go to interview some more people. Don't forget to document your learnings, and your canvas is the best place to do that. Okay, exactly like your product backlog, maybe you're the best place to document your user stories. It's the same here. You want to update your documentation to keep it somewhere visible, and base your next moves on that. If you don't do that and it just stays in your head, it's not validated learning. We could say it's somehow a for loop or a while loop. I'm speaking to developers here. So don't stop until you have at least 10 persons interviewed. Once again, the goal is not numbers. It's not a long list of people. But you do have to reach a certain number for your results to be somehow representative of a given population. Once again, it's just a rule of thumb. Below 10 people in a given population, you might get false positives and stuff like that. So with 10 people, usually you get to a decent level of representativeness, I'd say. Okay? You need to have well-defined demographics. If those 10 people that you have interviewed are completely different from one another, you don't have well-defined demographics. You need to have consistency between those guys, because those characteristics are going to lead you in the solution that you implement. If they are all, for example, if you thought that they would be half ladies, half guys, and they end up being all half ladies, your product will not be the same if it's just targeted at ladies. Sorry about that. This is not a sexist remark, by the way. I hope you have all understood it. There are ladies in the room. Anyway. You need to have at least one must-have problems. If you don't have one, knowing that the problems that you are identified are the most painful, then of course logic means you won't have any must-have problems lower in the list. Okay? Must-have problems are the key. You won't be able to find paying customers for nice-to-haves. Sorry, guys. Except if you're building a game, but then it's a totally different kind of business. And it's really important to understand, once again, how those people solve their problems today, what other alternatives they're using. Maybe, once again, it's a product. Maybe it's just a relative that does it for them. Maybe it's an Excel sheet or whatever. This is important for you to position yourself related to afterwards. Okay? Once you have that, and this iteration can take from a few days to a few weeks usually. On Kodesk, I think we did probably 6 or 7 different cycles on all kinds of companies. So once again, we were trying to find a problem for office space in general. We wanted to improve the way people work and the environment in which they work. And so that was our general vision. And we tried to interview different kinds of managers and different kinds of companies. And we learned a lot. We were very surprised by some of the answers. For example, that's always an example I take, but at some point we managed to meet a very important manager in Mobistar, the telecom company in Belgium. And they had just moved to a brand new office in Brussels. And we thought, hey, that might be a good opportunity, because obviously they must have thought about the working conditions of their employees and so on. So we're going to ask them some questions. We thought that their problem would be, yeah, we have this big office space that of course, we are not using all of it for now because half of it will be for our future growth, and we don't want to pay too much rent for it. Turns out, they don't give a damn. They have enough money, and the rent is really clearly not that expensive for them compared to all the rest. So that was not a problem, and it was really important to understand it at this point. But a problem that we had not anticipated at all is the guy started to ask, okay, but that means that every day there will be different people in my office space. Every day there will be new people coming through the door and working alongside my employees. My employees are going to make depressions. Clearly something that we had not anticipated. And guess what? He was wrong. The employees would not make depressions because of that. But that was his belief, and he was the guy we were supposed to sell our solution to. So if he thinks about that, if he believes that, we have to take that into account. And this is a kind of lessons that you can learn, and I mean, we've learned plenty of that. Problem is, at some point we were so impatient and we wanted to get our solution out, we stopped too early with that. We learned our lesson, but still. There are a lot of mistakes that we avoided thanks to that process. Once you have reached those key conditions, then you can move on to the second step, usually. That's the problem-solution experiments. Now you have a customer and a problem. Next step in your business model is to find the proper solution. You might be tempted at this point to start writing some code, firing up your IntelliJ, and again, Maven create project, whatever. Well, guess what? The most efficient technique is not writing code. Writing code takes time, takes money. Even if it's your time and your money, it is still money and time. So the easiest way, wireframes. You can already visualize your solutions, your key features, your key ways to solve the problems you have identified. And that can be very powerful. It's very easy to draft. There are plenty of very good tools to do that today. You can even do dynamic wireframes. They almost look like apps, but they're not apps. People can play with them on their phone or on a website. They can click it and it actually moves and animates around. Very easy to build. Go, if you don't know about it, go to Balsamiq. They have some really good tools. There are plenty of the Pop app on the iPhone on mobile phones to make those wireframes dynamic. Those are really good. And they're very fast to use. And another thing that you want to validate at this stage is a pricing proposition. Don't go to people and ask them, how much would you pay for my service? Of course, they will always say a very low number, if not zero. Okay? Try to go back to your list of alternatives. Okay? They're paying that much for this competition product, whatever. They're spending that much time to solve the problem on their own. Try to find your positioning in the middle. Maybe propose several alternatives. Would you be ready to pay 100 euros once, 10 euros a month? Try different models like that, but ask them if they would be ready to pay for that. There's another technique that can be very efficient. Ask them to tell you how painful it would be for them to pay that amount. You want to be in the sweet spot between no biggie, of course I will pay that, and nah, I would never pay that. If they pay with a little bit of pain, then you're good. You're just at the level where it's profitable for you and they still want to pay. And then, yeah, once you have those drafts, once you have those wireframes, go back to your first customers, the ones that you interviewed during the problem interview phase, and show them your wireframes, okay? Show them what you got, and go to their referrals as well. See how they react to the features that you have in mind. how they would interact with them. Do they seem confused? That's a very important part. That means that you have too many things in there. Okay? See how they react to your features. Also analyze their emotional reaction to your pricing proposition. This will be mostly non-verbal. And once again, it is an iterative process like most Agile and Lean stuff. Learn and adapt. Update your canvas. Now you're updating the box on the upper left between the value proposition and the problem. And you're also updating the lower right part, the revenue part. Try to write as little code as possible. Once again, I know this is frustrating. We are developers. We want to write that. Be reassured, this process does not take long. Okay? If you do plenty of iterations, if you have some time to do it, actually it's even something that you can do on the side of your day job. I noticed that at this point, during all this presentation, at no point I said, quit your job now. It's still too early. I did it. It was painful. You don't need to quit your job at this point. All of that, all of this validation, you can do it on nights, weekends, in weddings where you're invited, stuff like that. It's really, really easy. Okay? So try to not write, to restrain yourself from writing any code at this point. Landing pages are really good technique, really. They're easy to put together. You don't need to code to put a landing page together. If you want to, because you're really frustrated and you want to put up some HTML page like you're shivering and so on, okay, do it. But there are some good tools also to do it and to learn lessons from it. What you want to learn from a landing page is how is your message perceived? How is your unique value proposition working? And especially converting mere visitors into potential users. So one thing that you might want to measure with a landing page is just put an email field in there. People are asked for their email all the time, and for them it's some first level of commitment. So it's interesting for you to know. And in addition to that, it gives you a nice mailing list. A list of people that you can reach out to ask more questions and get more feedback. So this is really valuable. Landing pages are good. And they're easy to A/B test. If you want to test several possible value propositions, you can put together several alternatives of your landing page and see which one gets the most email addresses in your list. So that's also very important information. And once again, don't be afraid to get out in the wild, ask people around in cafes and so on. If you're the extrovert type, which is kind of rare, I think, in developers, unfortunately, or fortunately. I'm an introvert, by the way, so I'm not really comfortable with doing that. But I know some people who are, so that can be very valuable as well. Okay? And then, once you have all that, means you have validated most of your hypothesis in those 4 key boxes, and a little bit at the bottom right, but mostly those. And then you can start coding. Now it's a good idea to spend some time coding. And I noticed that I said spend and not waste. Now you're not wasting your time anymore because you have validated enough. You have enough certainty. I'm not saying you're 100% certain, but you've done enough of the job to actually minimize the risk of spending your time coding. Okay, to finish with, I just have a few words of warning, things that I've learned with my own experience that I want to give back to you. So, words to the wise. As I said, don't quit your job until you really have to. Usually until you have found your proper customer problem. I did that, and I went through all my savings. I went through most of the savings of my co-founder. We went through. And at some point, we were forced to release something because it was the last resort. We didn't have any other solution. Okay? It was not a life or death event. I never thought of killing myself. I just went back to freelancing for another customer and to fill in the tanks again, but it was painful. Okay? I wished I had stayed in my job a little longer just to take the time to validate all that before I jumped in. As I said, incorporation can be very painful in some situations, in some administrative contexts, so don't incorporate before you really have a business. Usually the last point where you need to incorporate is when you involve investors, because they will want to have shares of an existing company and then you need an existing company. Okay. But before you get to that, try to stay as long as possible with even just a debt recognition with your co-founder, for example, if you put some money on the table. That's going to be enough. You don't need to incorporate for that. As I said, so when we won the first startup weekend back then, the team was 6 people or 7 people, but people I didn't know and who didn't know me. It's really, really terrible to start any sort of business with people you don't know if you can trust them. Not because they're bad, but just because you don't know them. And it's really an emotional experience. It's an initiatic path in some ways, and you have to do it with people you can trust. Even when you do it with people you trust, you have surprises because it's really an intense experience. It really puts the relationship in hard positions, and you have to at least trust the people you work with. So the first thing I did after the startup weekend, I said to the other guys, okay, if you want to do it, do it. Once again, I don't care about the idea. I know it's worth nothing. May the best win, sort of thing. But I went to talk to a business guy, a sales guy that I knew, that I trusted. It was a dear friend of mine, and I knew that I wanted to do it with him. He was my dream team, basically. And I really advise you to find somebody who's complementary to you, that you know very well, that you want to build something strong with. Once again, a good thing for you is that Agile methodologies, you know about them, so you get some inspiration there. Another good thing about Agile methodologies is that they are perfect fit with Lean Startup. So once you start implementing your code, try to use everything you've learned to write some proper user stories, or however you want to work. If you want to do some Kanban or whatever, use those, and they perfectly fit together. So much so that at some point, especially if you work with a design co-founder, you will find that you miss the design equivalent of those methodologies. There are some experiments being done at the moment. Google for Lean UX, for example. There are some really good things in there. But Agile methodologies and Lean Startup are great together. Do not give shares for advice. Especially in Europe, I would say even especially in Belgium, you will find plenty of people who are okay to give you feedback, advice, coaching for shares in your company. In my opinion, bad idea. Because they are not really involved. There's this difference, once again a metaphor, but between chicken and pigs. Pigs are really involved. Chickens, not so much. If they just give you advice, it's not valuable enough, okay? They need to be taking some kind of a risk, and there's usually no bigger risk than financial risks. Okay, so try to value that. On the other hand, I think it's always a bad idea to take just the money, what we call dumb money. if they just write a check and put it on the table and then they say, okay, see you back in 6 months, and then in 6 months they say, okay, I'm out. It's not worth a lot either. What you want is smart money. People who come with money, of course, but also advice, contacts, and not to be co-founders per se, but to help you out with their experience and their network. It's just transition to something else. Once again, one of the things that makes our countries less ideal to start startups than in other contexts is the investment deal culture. If you strike a bad deal today, it's going to have ripple effects in the future. Okay? If your valuation is not good enough right now, you're going to have a hard time finding more investment money later. And some investors don't want to work with some kinds of early investors. So try to think about that and take every involvement of an investor very, very carefully. My last piece of advice, really take everything I've said today with a grain of salt, because this is just my own experience. And there are plenty of things that were valid for me and might not be valid for you, but I hope you have learned a few things and you can reuse some of these in your search for your own startup business. That's it. Thanks a lot. Any questions? We have 15 minutes left, so that's plenty. No questions at all? You can all go to your lawyer, accountant, whatever tomorrow. Yes?
When is the best moment to hire your first employee?
So the question is, when is the best moment to hire the first employee? It's a hard question because I said earlier that it's generally a bad idea to give shares for advice. What I should have said too is that it can be a good idea to give away shares for work. And and it's very hard to find those developers or employees in general who are willing to help for just shares. Because believe me, I've tried, you cannot pay the rent with shares in a startup. It doesn't work. I don't know why. Anyway. So yeah, it's very hard. At the same time, you need some help. I would say that if you already have some co-founders and you have some traction, you have something that you can show for, and you have something to convince somebody to work with you, then it's good. But what you want is, I mean, the early employees are critical. They're the foundation of your company. I would argue even more so than the co-founders. They're the one who are going to build the foundation of your system, the foundation of your organization, the foundation of your business culture, depending on who that is. And so it's really critical that you do it with really, and it's very hard because usually you want to find the right person, but on the other hand, you also need the person who accepts to work for you. So it's it's a hard combination to find, but I would say, as soon as you have something validated and you actually need some help to build it to another level. But you need to validate first, in my opinion. Any other question? Over there.
What can you pay with angel money? Is it just to pay the bills of the office or hosting and stuff like that, or can you also get a salary, and how much is reasonable?
Another hard question. So what can you pay with angel money? Can you pay yourself a salary, or is it just to pay for your office and your administrative costs and so on? You shouldn't be ashamed of talking about that with investors. They know that you have some responsibilities and you have some financial costs and so on that you need to take care of. And they usually know that if you are not paid enough and you're in, I mean, if you're always looking for creative ways to feed yourself or to to put a roof over your head, then you're not going to be creative. You're not going to be productive. You're not going to make good use of that money. So you have to find the right balance, but you should never refrain yourself from talking about that with your investors. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that, okay, I'm going to start, in my business plan, I have set aside 15,000 euros for myself as a salary. No, that might be too much. But usually, a good rule of thumb is just, once again, it's an opportunity cost. So if you currently you are a consultant, you work as a freelance for companies, I don't know, for 400, 500, 600 euros a day, make that your valuation, make that your salary, because you don't want to. I mean, you're taking a risk anyway, and you're going to need to account for a lot more things than when you're just working for a company. So take that into account. Then it's usually negotiation with investors. There are different politics and different policies involved, but yeah, don't be afraid to talk about it. And of course, you should set aside a salary for yourself. You're not. Once again, it is a cost, and the worst thing you can do is hide it under the carpet and hope that it will solve itself. That's the worst way to start. And if you are co-founders, if you have co-founders, it's the same for all of them. Now, of course, you will see that when you have this responsibility, when you feel the pressure of, okay, I'm taking someone's money, somebody is trusting me with their own savings somehow, you will not abuse it. You will not wait for them to sign the check and then go on vacation somewhere on the beach enjoying pina coladas. You won't do that, believe me. This is not the year 2000 anymore. People used to do that in the dot-com bubble, but not anymore. Okay, does that answer your question? Any other questions? No? Well? Here? Okay.
When to do a Kickstarter?
When to do a Kickstarter? Yeah, we didn't talk about crowdfunding. I managed to avoid it, but anyway. No, just kidding. Well, first of all, Kickstarter is for specific kind of product. We didn't really talk about it here. Hardware products are a totally different thing. The reason why I talked about those tools today is because I knew that I was talking to a crowd of software developers, and software products have a totally different dynamics than hardware products. For hardware products, you generally need a huge pile of cash ahead, up front, just to kickstart the manufacturing process. There's usually some long R&D involved as well. A lot of expertise. There are some patents to secure. Some legal documents with all the organizations who verify that your product meets the security requirements and so on. It's really a complex process. So I would even say, before you ask yourself, when do I do a Kickstarter? The first question to ask is, when do I build my first prototype? If you really want to build a hardware product, try to find, to validate as many hypotheses as you can before even starting to build something, to build the first iteration of your prototypes. Because once you start doing that, building your first prototypes, you can ask any Kickstarter campaigner. It took them months, if not years, to reach something that was ready for a Kickstarter. So I would say that all the tools that we mentioned today, the techniques that we've mentioned today, are mostly relevant before you start your first prototype, and then it takes a whole lot more time to reach the step at which you can actually launch a Kickstarter. I mean, the usual kind of Kickstarter. I mean, the hardware products, the gadgets, and that sort of things. But yeah, it is a different business. Of course, it's much better than a few years back when you didn't have Kickstarter and you actually needed to raise capital money, or actually these kind of hardware products could only be launched from existing companies with huge capitals, but still, it's still very difficult. And it's much harder than most people realize. Plus, you need some really strong things to show, because there are so many Kickstarter campaigns now that your video, your demonstration needs to be straight to the point, and people need to understand right away what it is, and if it's true, because there are also a lot of bullshit products. So yeah, I would say when to start building, making a Kickstarter campaign, later, well after that. But this can really help identifying the right product to build. Once you have found that, then the iteration process, basically the Kickstarter campaign and the preparation for the Kickstarter campaigns happens in between I have validated my hypothesis and I'm starting to sell something. In software product, this intermediary phase is really short usually. In hardware products, it's much longer. So, other questions?
If there are no other ones, in terms of culture, you experience both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So, why do you think there is no European Google or European Microsoft or European Facebook or European say one? I mean,
well, the first off, there are some very good examples of European companies who succeed very well. Skype, SoundCloud, those companies are hitting big, and they stayed in Europe for a long time. Of course, at some point they went global, so everybody thinks that they went American, but actually they really started here and they're really successful. It's true that it's harder, and for me, I always say it's not just about the money, and in the culture, the most things that I've seen are really big impediments, I'd say, are the exit strategies. When you already have some big companies who are likely to buy you, it's more interesting for you, it's more interesting for investors, it kind of serves as a driving force for the rest. So we need, I mean, it's the egg and the chick problem. We need to find a way to start it. And by the way, the best way to start it is not to rely on nation states. I mean, on public money, because I mean, most of the time they do it wrong. But there are some private investors. I mean, the big companies, especially for example in London, they're investing a lot to create some of those exit strategies and bootstrap the machine. It's going to take some time yet, but it's going in the right direction. And another thing I think is fear of failure. There are so many people who have plenty of potential and plenty of ideas, but are so afraid of failing because of the impact it might have on your future reputation. And what if I need to find another job afterwards? Even a job at a company, at a startup, possibly. They think that the fact that they have failed will decrease their chances of finding something. And on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean is completely the opposite. The more people learn from failure, the more valuable they are in the marketplace. And you find plenty of companies who actually, source new employees who were formerly working for failing startups. So I don't know how to change that, really. I think it will evolve with time, and people will. There will be more and more entrepreneurs who will learn like that. I think existing entrepreneurs have a huge role to play. Successful entrepreneurs, especially. I mean, with the SoundClouds and the Skypes and so on, if they can relay that message to new entrepreneurs, that will help a lot. But I don't know how exactly that will change. And yeah, there's also another thing that I really like about not just the US. It's something that you can find in different locations actually, but it's still not generic enough for me. It's the paid forward culture. The idea that you're not necessarily expecting immediate return for when you help out somebody. Sometimes you know that it's going to come back to you 3 years down the road, but you don't care. You just help out for the sake of helping out, of meeting someone, of just building a relationship, and maybe sometime it will come back. And this is something that you can find. I mean, when I was in TechCrunch Disrupt with Kodesk, the Airbnb office was just a few hundred meters away. And we thought, okay, let's drop by and see if we can do something. We just dropped by the Starbucks coffee downstairs. We bought a couple of coffee, and we managed to squeeze our way into the elevator to the Airbnb office. And we said to his assistant, okay, would you like to have a break with some coffee? We'd just chit chat with him. She said, sure, I'm gonna make an appointment for you. He's in a meeting right now, but tomorrow he'll meet you. And this is the kind of, I mean, those guys, I mean, he came to the appointment in a limousine. So he doesn't need to help you. He doesn't need the money, he doesn't need to be paid for that. He just does it because, who knows, it might help him sometime down the road. So that's the kind of culture that we need to build. And for that, I mean, that's easy to change. Huh? We all have power to help fellow entrepreneurs, and I do it, I mean, a lot of times. It's just about, yeah, not expecting to be paid right away. Just thinking in terms of long-term investment. Other questions? Yeah?
When is the right time to go to the investors? I mean, is it worth to build a full product or just a prototype? Because the amount of money and the amount of share is different.
The general rule of thumb, the question is, when is the right time to involve investors? Do you need a full product, or can you go with just a prototype? Basically, the higher the risk for investors, the lower your valuation. So the more the more things you have already validated, the lower the risk, the lower the amount of shares that you're going to give away, basically, for a similar amount of money. So really, I insist, you don't need to build a prototype. You need to build the minimal thing that are necessary to validate your hypothesis. If you come with traction, with even letters of intent from customers, potential customers who say, yeah, I will pay 20 euros a month for that, I commit to it somehow, it's enough. Even if they are paying, for example, you're putting out a phone number that they can call if they need your service, it's not scalable at all, but you already have 50 people calling you every day and paying 50 euros a month for a subscription to that service. That's even more valuable than any website ever. So really focus on validating hypothesis, understanding the market, and most of the time when you focus on that, you will have learnings, you will have lessons that nobody else has figured out before. And particularly that no investors have seen solved that way before. So they will be interested in that because you've hit the ground. You've gone to see people. You validated that.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
But what if I spend my savings to I don't know, great Facebook campaign and try to attract more users to my product? Maybe it's better to go to investors after that when they get like user base.
So the question is, what if you spend all your savings on a Facebook campaign, and then you need to go to investors with that? And I mean, it's usually this kind of marketing you have to use it carefully. It can cost a lot of money. Once again, we tend to think that social media is free marketing, but it's not. And when you start to pay for Facebook ads, it can be very powerful, especially as it's well targeted, but there are more efficient, less costly ways to find customers. And once again, one of the most powerful ways is just to ask around, to interview people, ask them if they know somebody. I mean, use word of mouth and use your early evangelists. If you have that, then you're good. And it's much more efficient and less costly than Facebook ads.